Welcome to the third day of our series. As we conclude today, we want to thank you for joining us. As an agency that serves Howard County, we are pleased to be supported by another active community member who plays a big role in celebrating and supporting our community at large. Please welcome County Commissioner Paul Wyman.
Hey, just want to take this opportunity to thank the Family Services Association for all the work that you do, and especially here in the month of April for highlighting something as important as the prevention of child abuse in our community. And you know, this whole virus has brought a tremendous amount of stress and difficulties to many families throughout Howard County. And so highlighting something like preventing child abuse while at the same time making sure that we're thinking in totality about all the folks in our community that are in need. And when I look at it in those terms, it's amazing to me the number of nonprofits across our community that have responded and shifted on a dime in the manner in which they provide services to the most vulnerable here in Howard County now. And so I just could not be more proud of the nonprofits in Howard County. What you guys have done here in the last 30 days and the way you are delivering resources and services to people in need, it's unmatched and it's nothing short of heroic. So thank you to all of our nonprofit organizations for reaching out and doing that great work. You know, we have seen our community many, many times in crisis, floods and tornadoes and ice and snowstorms. And every time our community has risen up to the challenge. And what we're finding here during this virus pandemic is it's been no different. Our community is rising up, from our nurses and doctors and cashiers at the stores and all those folks on the front line being heroes. And then the people who are staying at home and doing their part to prevent the spread of the virus, and they're being hunkered down heroes. And then the nonprofit organizations coming in behind and providing resources and support and their heroic efforts. It just shows time and time again how our community locks arm in arm and we go into battle together, and we always come out the other side victorious. And I'm confident when history looks back on this moment in our community, they're going to view it very, very favorably on how we were able to flatten that curve, protect the least among us, and also make sure that we prevented the spread of the virus and reduced the number of deaths in our community. So congratulations, everybody. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you're doing. Keep up the great work, and soon we'll be on the other side of this together. God bless Howard County.
We'd like to welcome back Dr. Lori Desautels. For those of you who couldn't join us on Tuesday, Dr. Desautels has been an assistant professor at Butler University since 2016, where she teaches both undergraduate and graduate programs. Lori was also an assistant professor at Marian University for 8 years, where she founded the Educational Neuroscience Symposium. Lori's passion is engaging students through the application of neuroscience, and especially as it applies to attachment, regulation, and educator brain state. She graduated with a BS in Special Education from Butler University, an MS in Counseling Education from Indiana University, and she earned her PhD in Philosophy with an emphasis in early adolescence and thought formation. Lori resides in Indianapolis with her husband, Michael. She has 3 grown children, Andrew, Sarah, and Reagan, and 4 rescue fur babies. We are very pleased to welcome back Dr. Lori Desautels.
Welcome to the breakout session for the Howard County Family Service Association Conference. I am going to continue sharing the strategies and the practices that I introduced in the keynote, and go into a little bit more detail as far as how these practices and strategies are calming to the nervous system. They actually create a portal to the prefrontal cortex, opening up pathways in the brain that can, so that children and adults, all of us, can access this prefrontal cortex, especially when we are experiencing moments of stress and moments of dysregulation. So again, my thank you to Barb, and thank you to the whole conference committee and to the Howard County Family Service Association for making this available in this time through virtual learning. And I'm just really ready to go. So I'm going to share my screen. So we'll get this, if I can do this. And we are going to start this PowerPoint. I'm going to review just a little bit from from the keynote. And again, I want to thank all of you for all that you're doing right now in this time, caring for your families, caring for your students, your clients. We've all been thrown into so many different roles so quickly, so unexpectedly. And I just have a huge heart of gratitude on this Tuesday for all of you. So I did not share. I was so excited this morning when I shared the keynote that I forgot to introduce myself. So I am full-time faculty at Butler University. I have been at Butler for 4 years, and I teach undergraduate courses and graduate courses in the Applied Educational Neuroscience certification. Actually, we are still accepting admittances and people who would like to join the next cohort group, which begins this summer. It is a 9-hour certification at Butler, and it is in applied educational neuroscience with an emphasis in brain development, trauma, adversity, and resiliency. We have grown from 6 graduate students in the pilot program to this year we have 60 graduate students who are teachers, administrators, clinicians, mental health professionals. We've had pediatricians. We've had CEOs of social and emotional learning companies. I mean, it's just been incredible. So if you are interested and would like to begin, please, you can email me and I'll give my contact information at the end. So I began this work probably in this specific area about 10 years ago when I was beginning my work at Marian University here in Indianapolis. And at that time, I was also teaching undergraduate and graduate students. And I actually was observing first and second year special education teachers from our MAT program. And at that time, when I was observing and supervising, I remember walking out of Arlington High School. This is the year that the state took over 4 schools in Indianapolis and 1 in Gary. And I remember saying to myself that I was not walking the walk. I had lost touch at the ground level. And so I asked our dean at the time, I'm going to make this story very short, if I could go back into the classroom. It was February. And so Marian gave me an opportunity the following fall. They gave me a course release so that I was able to co-teach in a classroom 2 mornings a week. And all I asked for was a large, diverse public school district. I did not want at the time a private or charter school. I wanted a very large, diverse public school system. Washington Township jumped on board. And so 6.5 years ago, I began in a 5th grade classroom, and I began teaching math and writing 2 mornings, sometimes 3 mornings a week, with Deanna Nybarger. And what happened that semester when I was given 1 semester, 1 course release, has now evolved into going into my 7th year in the classroom. So I think of all the roles I am fulfilling right now, being in the classroom is the most significant for me. I am learning from students directly. I'm making mistakes. I have good days, and all of the strategies that I'm going to be sharing with you today are not out of a lab and they're not out of a textbook. These are strategies that I am implementing and have implemented for the past 6 years in all of the different classrooms. So I started in 1 and then moved all through Washington Township into almost every elementary school, 2 of their middle schools, and worked with the freshman staff at North Central High School. When I came to Butler, Dr. Shelley offered me a full-time faculty appointment, And I asked her for that course release so we could continue growing this work and turning it into a certification. So at Butler, I have been at IPS 60, working with second grade, third grade, fifth grade, and sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. This past year, I was at School 55, our Butler Lab school, and I was in 2 different fifth grade classrooms. Just like many of you or many of the social workers, counselors, teachers, our work ended abruptly in March. I did not get a chance to say goodbye to the class. We were working on planting a garden together, which I'm going to share that story today. And so it's just been a really difficult time. And there is and has been no closure for many of us in our work with our youth and especially for our children. So I am so excited to share from the ground level this work and how it has informed my workshops and professional developments, because honestly, I don't know what I would say to anybody if I were not directly working with children in this time and youth. Also, St. Mary's Early Childhood Center has been a gift to me over the past 2 years. I've been so blessed to be working in a variety of their centers, working with their staff and modeling ways to calm and regulate 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And I mentioned that, I know, in the keynote too. So some of these slides I'm going to slip right through because an hour is not long, but I want to leave you with at least 5 to 6 practices and strategies, whether you are a clinician, whether you are a teacher, social worker, counselor, any capacity that you are a part of right now, including parenting or grandparenting. I mentioned this in the keynote. This is not just about others. This is not just about the students or the youth or the families that I work with. It is about me. It is about my brain and body state. And it is about my ability to always stay regulated. And again, we're not always regulated, but to try to get calm and to feel that sense of relaxed alertness before I interface with families, children, and of course, my own children. So I wanted to make you laugh a little bit this morning. Note to self, and this is the very first pillar of this framework, is my brain and body state. So along with all of the growth and healing, remember to give yourself time for integration. Integration is being, which is a fancy word for allowing the to settle. It looks like doing nothing. This nothing is necessary and critical for well-being. So I hope you're smiling a little bit because we are all on a fast pace, and this is very, very important to just be. And so I want to start with that educator brain state first off. I love this image because this is therapeutic. This is healing, this is resiliency, and this is a touch point. This is the second pillar in this framework of applied educational neuroscience. Being with me is healing me. It's really not about the words that we say. It's not about conversation sometimes. It really is being with another. And I love this quote or this conversation between the rabbit and the bear. "I'm afraid," said Rabbit. "What are you afraid of?" asked Bear. "I don't know," replied Rabbit. "I just am." "Then I will sit with you until you're not afraid anymore," said Bear. "We will face it together." And I think because the brain is a social organ and because attachment develops the nervous system, because attachment is the context for brain development and nervous system development, this is critical for us to understand that emotional contagion from other people can uplift us, or it can actually trigger us into sometimes that survival state. And we all know that nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to activate someone's stress response system. But it happens because we are social and feeling creatures before we think. So that's what Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor has shared for many years, is that we are not thinking creatures who feel. We are feeling and social and sensing creatures who think. And that aligns with brain development. So as I mentioned yesterday, trauma is held in the body and in the brain. I want to reiterate that for those of you who were not a part of the keynote. We know that trauma is physiological, and it is when stimuli is coming in from the environment outside of us or from the environment within that feels too much and too fast and too soon. So my body remembers this school that I trusted that suddenly disappeared. My body remembers the pandemic. My body remembers the grief, loss, isolation, fear, hunger, and danger. And I felt and was alone. So what if it happens again? I need to keep myself safe. I think as we move through COVID-19, we are going to see a layering of trauma like we've never seen before, because many of our families and communities that were experiencing significant adversity before the pandemic are also now layering this type of national and global and community and familial trauma on top of what was already happening. So I think this is something that we all are going to need to be prepared for as we move back into the world, working with youth and working with families. And again, I will be skipping some of these slides, so bear with me. Yesterday, we talked about that the language of trauma and adversity begins in lower brain regions. And the language, in a very simplified way, this is not scientific here, I'm just trying to help us to understand it. We pick up on sensations first. We notice smells, we notice sounds, we notice clothing, we notice facial expressions and postures. And the best way for our clients and our youth to describe how an adversity has hit them hard is through sensation. I know that when I've been working with children, they love this activity, and we do it several times a week. It is part of our routine to have a sensation word wall or a sensation word jar where we pick a sensation that aligns with how we're sensing everything in our bodies. And we draw it, we color it, we give it a shape, we give it a size. So there are many others besides these. Actually, many of our students throughout the last couple of years have created more of these sensation words, but numb, teary, peaceful, calm, edgy, tingly, tight, tense. So many more that aren't even listed here that we can add. And when you can draw it and color it, give it a shape, give it a size, you get it out of the body and the brain, and you put it in a safe container that's outside of you. And as Dr. Dan Siegel always says, what is shareable is bearable, and what you can name, you can tame. As I mentioned yesterday, the keynote, the body overwhelm is really the best description of how adversities hit and strike us. They are held in the body, which are implicit memories. And so I want to talk with you this morning about just a concept that is in a brand new book by my friend and colleague, Dr. Donna Jackson. And the microglia cells are really the immune cells of our brain. And we thought for over 300 years that the brain was immune to inflammation, that the brain, it was not, the body has its immune system, but the brain was separate, it was protected. But what we know now is that these tiny little glial cells that were known to be the trash collectors are now known to amp up when things are going well, and they protect the cell. But when things are not going well, they can actually eat away at healthy synapses and connections in the brain. So these little cells, and the name of the book is called The Angel and the Assassin. And she is referring to these microglial cells. They make up 1/10 of our cells. They originate during the 9th day of gestation, swimming up the bloodstream into the brain. This is new research in the last 15, 20 years. They are especially reactive in the hippocampus, which is that seat of memory, all kinds of memory happening in the hippocampus, and learning and emotion. And in a balanced state, these microglial cells create nutrients that stimulate healthy neurons and promote synapses. But when they are dysregulated, which I'm going to show here, they can create neuroinflammation in the brain. So many of the autoimmune disorders that many people are challenged with, and those are also listed in the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, talk about how inflammation, and we know this today, is a part of almost every disease that we experience. So they are the first responders to insult and mediate both in neuroinflammation. So we see the angel in the cell, and we see the assassin in the cell. And following cellular damage, microglial extend their processes towards the lesion, modifying their morphology. They release cytokines and other mediators, and eventually migrate towards the damaged area and remove the debris. This is what they do well. But we also know that under chronic levels of cortisol and adrenaline in the brain, they actually can damage those connections, those healthy connections that we need that produce inflammation in the brain. So this is something that we really need to think about, because the strategies that I'm going to share today can dampen down that stress response system in the bodies, and create a healthier brain architecture where the neuroinflammation is lessened in the brain. So we talked about manipulation and control in many of our children and youth that carry in pain-based behaviors. And for many of our families and youth, manipulating and controlling is a form of survival. But these conditions can look very, very oppositional and defiant. They can look shut down. They can look apathetic. They look very disrespectful. But when we understand, and this is what I emphasized in the keynote, when we understand what that behavior is communicating to us, and we understand what that signal is, then we begin to ask different questions about behaviors that we see. And this is something that one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about over the last couple of months is this work that I'm sharing with you all today is what our middle and high school students need now. I would love for there to be a class in educational neuroscience for our youth, our young adults, so that we are not recycling these same conditions that we see that are generational as far as trauma and adversity. When you know better, you do better. And so we are teaching our children and youth as young as 4 and 5 years old about their neuroanatomy. We are sharing that when you're anxious, when you're worried, when you're angry, you're not a bad person. Nothing is wrong with you, but your brain has learned how to fire and wire together so that you actually have a new wiring, kind of new connections for fight, flight, or shutdown. And when I keep talking today about that survival brain state, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So as we look, and I mentioned this in the keynote, but we know that some of the strategies are so important in being present, That's a touch point. So frequent feedback, check-ins, small, frequent choices, and more yes moments. Yes, I think we can do this. Tell me your ideas. Would you like to, create this project before we have lunch or after we finish? It feels like you need to be outside. Maybe we should take 10 minutes outside right now, or would you like to work on half the assignment and then take a break and go outside? So they're just small moments of frequent choices and yeses. Nonverbal assurance is huge. It is our nonverbal communication that speaks volumes. Children in stress read us like TSA agents at the airport. They are hyper alert and hyper vigilant to our facial expressions, usually from the eyes up. They are listening to our tone. And actually, Dr. Steve Porges shares that in heightened levels of stress, the way we hear changes. Our middle ear muscles begin to hear predator-like sounds. So that you might not feel that you're raising your voice at a student or your own child, but in an elevated survival state, that person is hearing differently. They are listening to your tone, and they might be reading you in a way that has more negative association than positive association. So space and time are also extremely important, as we know that many of us, to get calm and regulated, need space and we need time. So I did talk about that yesterday. Our question, or I keep saying yesterday, the keynote. Don't ask why the behavior. Let's start asking why the pain. He's violent, you say. Perhaps, but imagine what it takes for a child to strike an adult, his only source of survival. Imagine the depth of terror behind this bravado. So I love this quote because it is a depth of hurt that we are addressing at the tip of the iceberg. And this understanding this and understanding the why and the science is the very first step in changing adult behavior, whether we are counselors, social workers, teachers, or parents, in being able to sit beside that child or that adolescent. So we talked about this too. Trauma is not just a thinking thing. It's not just in our heads. It changes our perceptual system. It changes how we see the world. It changes what we think and how we think. And it oftentimes can, if there is chronic adversity, and I want to be very careful with this, if it's often experienced as kind of an emotional restraint. And we mentioned this, I mentioned this too in the keynote, that trauma doesn't have the last word. Emotional connections are the buffers and the support that can actually help any of us overcome the many adversities that we have experienced throughout our lives. So what can we do here? We begin to observe on an intuitive level. No checklist, no notes, no histories. We just watch him. We watch him watching his world. Go silently behind his eyes to see his world. When you see what he feels, you will have learned all that you need to know. And then we begin. And I think this just speaks volume about connection and the touch points that we'll be addressing today. So children have the resiliency to outlive their suffering if given a chance. And that happens when there are emotionally available, consistent, predictable caregivers that are present during that child's developing years. And that, again, has the last word. And that's the good news, because our brains are built to heal and they are built to repair. And they are always trying to return to a homeostasis. our brains are constantly looking for balance. And that is miraculous as we move through this research. So we know that our children come to us with their own interests, their own passions, and think about families you work with, or think about adolescents. It's April, and so many of us have been teaching or have been working with our clients or students for, some time. One of the things that I've been helping families with in this time, and also teachers, is picking out one or two passions or interests or areas of expertise that you already know about this child. And when you are e-learning with them, or when you have a chance to send an email or to check in with a text, remember that one special quality about that child and talk about that with them. Asking them, how's your dog doing? Who have you made laugh in the last couple of weeks? Or, how's it felt not to be with your friends face to face? How's that been for you? How are you doing with the loss of your grandmother? I know that was just a few months ago, sweetie. How is that feeling to you right now? So kind of making those associations, this seems like a no-brainer, but I think it's more about being intentional. And I love this quote from Louis Cozolino: "We are not the survival of the fittest. We are the survival of the nurtured." So as we move into these strategies, I want us to think about, again, touch points, attachment, so critical for calming us, regulating us, and getting us to that brain state where we can think clearly, where we can problem solve and create a pause and hold a memory. So this is one of the charts, and I told Barbara that I would be sending resources to all of you, and I apologize, this is a little blurry, I have a clear one, but we are having students and families and youth track where they are on charts, and this is one for children. So down in the green, that's where you're feeling calm, that's where you're feeling focused, it's where you are curious, you can be with another, and you're feeling, some type of contentment or joy. Then sometimes we get, a bit frustrated, we get maybe anxious or worried, and so we ramp up a little bit into fight flight. And we teach what's happening in the brain and body to our students when they are entering these different brain states. So our children and youth know when you start and you start to get agitated and angry and worried, your heart rate goes up, your respiration goes up, your blood pressure goes up. And so when we do focused attention practices, and when we are using sensory routines, those calm us. So we are actually sharing not only the strategy, but we're sharing what happens in the brain that calms what's being triggered. And we talked yesterday, the amygdala is our brain's smoke detector. It's our threat detection system. And so our children have learned about the amygdala, and they understand that when they're taking a deep breath with a longer exhale, they're calming that amygdala. So we have our students chart throughout the day or throughout a class period where they are in this. This is a great activity to do with families, adults, in your own homes, and we call it, are you above the line or below the line? And all of us are born with a negative bias. We have that bias because we have a brain for three purposes. And the very first purpose for a brain is survival. So because we are always prioritizing survival, then we do have a negative bias. We are always paying attention to what feels threatening, what feels unsafe, or what feels unfamiliar. So that negative bias reigns. We also have a brain for feelings. Emotions and sensations are happening in lower brain regions, midbrain limbic structures. And so that's where the research says we are feeling and sensing creatures who think. We are not thinking creatures who feel. We have to feel safe and feel felt before we can learn. So this is, are you above or below the line? We had our students, we created these little brain out of paper, and they colored and decorated them. Their names aren't on them, they're just on the back. And so we drew this big line, and we watched a small little documentary that I'll be happy to send to Barb. It's called Are You Above or Below the Line? And you don't even need to watch it, but it talks about being below the line is normal. Below the line, and many of us walk in to our classroom, to our school. Sometimes we wake up in the morning and we're out of sync, we're out of rhythm. And so it's normal to be above or below the line, but this shows our students move back and forth throughout a class period or throughout the day or throughout a session. And they can name what brain state they're in. So we're really thinking about discipline through a new brain aligned lens. And that is, it's not something we do to anyone. It is something we want to create within them. And this is what the new book I'm writing is about. It's looking at discipline through a brain aligned lens, and it's a perceptual shift for the adults. And I know, as I mentioned, that I would have been a very different mom had I known today I would have used this strategy at home with my own children. We would have been talking a lot more about brain states and not behaviors. So rethinking and reframing and wondering about your school, your practice, your classroom, and how can you change the rituals and the procedures. This is why applied educational neuroscience is not something else to add to your plate. It is the plate. It is the plate for everything that we do. And so we dump learning onto the plate. We socialize. That is another part of the plate. But the plate is the applied educational neuroscience. It's the brain, how our brains learn, how our brains feel, how our brains sense the world. So this is a strategy, a practice that becomes a part of our procedures and routines. I want to talk to you. This is my 5th grade class last semester, not this semester, the fall semester. And we have started a practice called focused attention practices. I cannot emphasize how powerful these practices are. And we use the term focused attention practice because meditation still has somewhat of a negative, or it has an association with religion or spirituality. And I want to be very clear in this breakout session that meditation is not, meditation is an executive function practice. It is a practice that gives our cortex an opportunity to pay attention and to focus and to, have stronger working memory, all of those executive functions. So a focused attention practice has, we start with breath. We are very intentional. We explain to our children and our adolescents what's happening in the brain when they take a deep breath and they take a longer extended out breath. And then we always start small. Maybe we start with 3 deep breaths. This is what we did in my 5th grade classroom. This is in December. We started in August talking about focused attention practices, and we built up from 3 deep breaths that took about 5 seconds to 3 minutes of laying down, if that was a choice. And we brought cold, chilled cucumber slices, and if they chose to, they didn't have to, they could put those on their eyes as they listen to soft, melodic, rhythmic music that was at about 60 beats per minute. And this was a process. This didn't happen overnight. So I'm going to send to Barb, and also my social media is filled with focused attention practices. You can use a visualization, you can use a sound, you can use a taste. We always use breathing. We can breathe in our favorite color and breathe out a worry. We take 3 deep breaths with one hand on our chest and one hand not over our mouth, but just breathing in and feeling the warm air coming out. It's extremely important to have a couple of seconds of a longer exhale, because that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering our respiration, lowering blood pressure, and lowering heart rate. So we were so excited. The 5th grade classes for the last 6-7 years, all of our classes, even our 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds, are doing focused attention practices. This is how we start the day. This is just like any procedure you would put into place, but it becomes a priority. And we start small. We always we process it after we do it. So we ask them how it felt. Did it feel weird? Did you love it? The students will begin to lead these. And if we don't have these, if we've forgotten, the students will remind us because they love it so much. So I have several resources to share with you about focused attention practices, but I cannot emphasize enough that this is not extra. It is something that we build into our routines and into our procedures. So I want to remind you of this slide again. This contains the 4 pillars of this work: my brain state, attachment, co-regulation, and teaching our children about their neuroanatomy. So when we do a focused attention practice, we're regulating. When we do a focused attention practice, we're talking about our neuroanatomy. When we're doing a focused attention practice, we are connecting with our students. When we do a focused attention practice, I'm doing it with them. So I'm actually modeling and teaching the behaviors I want to see. So I'm calming and taking care of my own brain state. So you can see how many of these strategies include all 4 pillars of this work. I want to share with you a touch point right now. And that touch point is the power of validation and the power of questions. This is my oldest son, Andrew. This was taken just a few years ago. And in his adolescent years, Andrew was really struggling. He's always struggled with anxiety since he was out of the womb. But in those later middle and early high school years, it was very upsetting and scary for our family because we saw Andrew's behaviors change drastically. And as parents, we were desperate. We were trying everything. And in that time, when all of us in the family were functioning in a survival brain state, I will never forget the moment that I received an email from Andrew's freshman Spanish teacher at Lawrence Central High School in Indianapolis. And it was coming to me at a time where I was getting emails from the dean's office. I was getting text messages and phone calls that were more negative than positive with regard to Andrew at that time. I was just not wanting to open up the email, but I did. And I want to share with you what that email said to me. Dear Dr. Desautels, I want you to know that Andrew completed his project today. He had a smile on his face and he was walking around and helping the other students. And then Brandon Pickett, his Spanish teacher, said at the very end, please let me know how I may serve you in the days and weeks to come. And I cannot tell you what that connection, what that email, and what that last sentence meant to me. Because this educator had seen a light in Andrew that had gone out for us as a family. Mr. Pickett saw what was going right and well with Andrew. And he brought hope back into our lives. And he brought hope back into Andrew's life. And so when I thought about that question, please let me know how I may serve you. And when I shared it with Andrew, it changed me. It changed my husband. And Andrew began developing a different relationship with Brandon Pickett. He worked his butt off in Spanish and got an A in that class. He got D's and F's and everything else, but he got an A in that class because the truth is we work for people we like. We work for people we respect. I took that question and I developed 3 questions from let me know how I may serve you. And those questions are, what do you need? If I'm calm and regulated, and I ask that to a child, to an adult, to an adolescent who's amping up, who's reaching that point of no return, that question, when it's asked genuinely from a regulated brain state, can actually shift that growing agitation in the other. How can I help? What can we do to make this better? Those questions my graduate students at Marian University and I created together. And we have been implementing these questions with families, with adults, and with our students with so much success. Because the brain processes questions longer than it does being told something. And when you ask from a regulated, calm state, you are heard and you are creating a sense of empathic resonance. There's nothing that feels better to human beings than feeling felt by another. So this is a touch point, and this is something that we are using in our schools, in homes. I'm going to be talking about this in a video next week during this COVID-19 time. So again, these are not extras. These are strategies that we are putting into place that are part of our procedures and part of our routines and practices. So as I talked about yesterday, we know that the brain develops very, very quickly, and the brain is sticky in the first 1,000 days of life. You can see here that it's not the number of neurons. I think I've heard anywhere between 36 billion neurons in the brain to 86 billion neurons in the brain to 100 billion neurons in the brain. But what we know, it's not about the number, it's about the connections, the synapses that wire up, and they wire up based on one main ingredient. And that ingredient, that's experience. Our brains are experience-dependent organs. They act like muscles, but they are building and growing and becoming stronger in different areas because of the experiences that we are exposed to. Our brains are also historical organs. They remember, brains and bodies. This is a bi-directional highway here. So we're not separating brain and body, but they remember implicitly. They're not conscious memories, they are implicit. And then that second greatest time of development begins to occur starting in upper elementary, middle school, and high school, where that brain is pruning away, consolidating synapses that it no longer is using, preparing that youth for young adulthood. So again, we're paying attention to what is meaningful during the first greatest time and the second greatest time of brain development. And we know that that brain develops from back to front and from the inside out. So I am meeting students with focused attention practices, with questions of connection in their brain state, so that I am meeting them where they are. And then once they are feeling calm and these lower brain regions of the limbic system and brainstem are becoming more integrated and organized, then we can access the executive functions in the prefrontal cortex. So I'm going to send this to Barb. It is an ebook for your brain state, because this work in being trauma responsive and adversity responsive is all about the adult. it's really not about children or youth at all. It is about us. We drive this car. And so these are filled with strategies for sensory regulation, connection regulation, and cortical regulation. And so these are for you. This is something that I would share with your staff, with your students. We did this with teachers. And this could be done in a business. I mean, it's just really cool as a family. I think it would be fun to chart how a family, it's really helpful to identify your language of adversity. So what do you do? What do you say to yourself? How do you experience something when you're agitated? So, what is your language of adversity? You can see here, this person wrote, I'm quiet. When I get upset, I'm reserved. My neck gets red and blotchy. I'm shorter with my words. I'm quick to blame. So again, what you can name, you can tame, and what's shareable is bearable. Then we had our educators identify language of resiliency. So the resiliency is, what can you begin to do, or what are you doing now that calms you? This has huge implications for the children and youth that we work with, because the same regulatory strategies that we put into place also calm our children. So here are some examples that we came up with as adults. Sometimes I need to talk about it. How many of you need another person to process negative emotion? How many of you need to be alone? How many of you need to sleep when you're upset? How many of you, I wish I could be with you right now so I could see, because this would be a lot more interactive. How many of you eat when you're upset? How many of us need to exercise to get calm and to regulate? How many of us listen to music or clean the house? How many of us take a hot shower? Or how many of us love on our animals? Or how many of us drink a Chardonnay or 2 or 3? So, we all have regulatory routines. And so some of those routines are really healthy, and some of them we might want to replace. But then we move into, once we've identified our brain state, what happens when we are rough and how we regulate, then we talk about the emotional contagion in helping our youth. So how do you meet students in regulation? What are the things that you could say or be in that moment to really co-regulate with that child and with that adolescent? Because that is the first step in the healing and the repairing process, when we are calm ourselves and we are approaching another in that calm, regulated state and modeling the behaviors that we want to see. So I'll be happy to send these slides to you. Because it's really important that, again, we begin with us. And I've gone over these points, so I want to share this quote with you as we're nearing the last few minutes. At times, so much of what I learned in education classes seem so irrelevant. Huddled on the floor before me is a terrified 10-year-old. 10 years of joy, discoveries, and fears, now in a state of total dysfunction. I hold her to keep her from falling apart. I know how to teach her math, and someday I will. But can I teach her to believe that her life will be better? And I think right now that's what many of our parents and educators, all of us, are prioritizing right now, is helping each other to feel safe and to feel felt. Because when we feel safe and when we feel connected and felt, the learning happens. And it really is secondary right now to emotional and physiological well-being. The conditions that this COVID-19 is bringing into all of our lives are the conditions that are hard on brains. That is unpredictable chronic adversity, isolation, and restraint. And so the antithesis of all of these are in the strategies and in the resources that I'm going to send to you. But the isolation is about connection. What are the touch points that we can increase and be more intentional with? Like validation, like the power of questions, like naming it to taming it, and using sensation jars and sensation word walls, having children and youth and adults identify and chart where their brain state and track where their brain state is each day. Restraint, the antithesis of that is movement. Emotional movement and physical movement. Some of us need to move to get calm. Some of us pace to get calm. Some of us need to move our hands to get calm. We knit, we crochet, we do needlepoint, we take a drive in the car. All of those are patterned rhythmic experiences that are calming to brain architecture. We know that today, the central challenge for all of us who are working in communities that are marginalized and are filled with some toxic levels of stress, that we want to deal with the primary pain without inflicting secondary pain. And this is why the way that we discipline in our communities, the way we punish, the way we incarcerate, the way we criminalize must change. And that's a whole nother presentation. We've got to deal with trauma and adversity through a new lens, a lens that understands what's beneath the signal and that is going to start pulling up that weed by the root and not the leaf. So as we look at co-regulation versus traditional punishment, you can see the shifts here. We know that co-regulating is being aware first of my own brain and body state. There is a much more intentional focus on the child or the adolescents or the adults' sensations and feelings. I am called to be a warm demander, one that is regulated and calm, but yet willing to set structure and boundaries and routines into place. It is my honor and responsibility to absorb and drain off a child's negative emotions. And if we think of an analogy, I want to become that thermostat instead of a thermometer that changes with every experience, mirroring the conflict or mirroring and jumping into the power struggle, like I have done 1,000 times parenting or teaching students. Again, I would have been a different teacher. I am a different teacher. I would have been a different counselor. I am a different counselor, and I certainly would have been a different parent. So I am running out of time, but I do want to share a couple more slides with you in the last, I've got 6 minutes. What is the one tool you have inside of you that can calm or escalate you? We've talked about this in the keynote, and it's so important. I want to reiterate this in the breakout. It is your tone of voice. This is the game changer. Your tone is read 24/7. Your tone can escalate a child, or your tone can co-regulate a child. But when it's a fake tone, children pick up on that too. And we do too as adults. So this is the one tool that all of us hold. Besides being able to breathe ourselves into regulation, we also can co-regulate with our tone of voice. This is a great polyvagal chart to use with adults and families that you work beside, having them track and understand that their brain states change continuously. And if we are functioning in a continual chronic fight flight, we have a new homeostasis, and we need to work on that. It's not bad, good, right, or wrong, but when you are constantly feeling hyper aroused and hyper vigilant, it takes one comment, one action that throws you over the top. So this is something that we're using with families where they can actually chart. You could do this in Google. You could have a wall chart of this. We have a simplified version for our children. And you can also use characters. We use, for younger children, we say when you're in the green, that's Winnie the Pooh. Superman is fight flight, and the Hulk is in the brainstem. We can use characters from Frozen. We use Harry Potter characters. Tigger is also fight flight. And then Eeyore is the shutdown frozen, and Winnie the Pooh is in the social engagement in the regulation. This is, and I believe I mentioned this in the keynote, but I will send this to Barb too. This has a lot of, you can modify this and work with this with your clients, with your students, with families, but it really is moving away from talking about behaviors all the time and really being very intentional and conscious and teaching our kids about their neuroanatomy through having them identify circle or color in their brain state. And this one we use with youth and adults so that they understand the difference between parasympathetic and sympathetic brain states. So you are all going to be sent this chart. It is 30 pages of regulatory strategies, connection strategies, and cortical strategies that are good for pre-K through age 90. We are so excited about this because this is literally another ebook that you can use in clinical practices, you can use with families, with children. We're using these as children are looking at these and they're creating their own personalized routine of regulation using these strategies. Creating amygdala areas in the room. Many of our children are taught how to use an amygdala area. It could be just a bucket or a basket filled with their favorite things that help them to feel calm. We are very intentional about using this in a classroom for celebratory purposes too, because it can turn very punitive very, very quickly. So we want to make sure that we model this. So I will go to an amygdala area when I come in the morning, and I'll share with my students, I had a great morning. I got up on the first alarm going off. I got all the animals fed. I was able to do 20 minutes of yoga. So I'm going to go into the amygdala area, grab a mint and a glass of water, and then we'll be starting our day. So we want to make sure that we model those in that way. These are focused attention practices for you. They are for all ages. Brain intervals are different than focused attention practices in that they wake up the brain. They get that brain engaged through an activity like making a peace sign and an okay sign. Go ahead and do this with me. We'll end with this. And switch and go back and forth as fast as you can. This should be really difficult for you because you don't have circuits in the brain that know how to do this. Your brain was trying like crazy to do this quickly. And the reason I can do this so well is because I do it all the time. The brain learns through patterned, repetitive experiences. So brain intervals wake up the brain, and focused attention practices dampen down the stress system and help us to focus in on what we need to. So you have part 1, part 2 that I'm sharing. This is a card deck of brain intervals that I'm going to be sharing with you, and you'll have another one of focused attention practices. I want to share these. This is so cool. Families right now in COVID-19, children and their families are creating amygdala areas in their homes. So this was sent to me by Jasper teachers that they were sharing amygdala areas. We use the term amygdala because it's good for our kids to understand the science. So these have actually been created in the last couple of weeks while students are doing e-learning and while they are home. For our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, we have animal regulation cards that we are using at St. Mary's. These can be for all ages, pre-K through middle school. You can modify and play with these because we all love animals, and we learn animal facts as we learn how to use our body and breath and movement to get calm. So I'm going to send all of these practices to Barb, and I will, I'm going to go to my contact page. I would love to come back and to meet you all in person. I want to share with you that you can reach out to me on Twitter. You can reach out to me on Facebook. Follow me on Facebook. My website is you didn't miss out on all this. This is like a 5-day presentation, but you can email me at Butler. You can, my website is revelationsineducation.com. Instagram, please reach out. I will be sending a lot of resources from the keynote and from today. And again, this is not like in person, but I am so grateful that we were able, and I was able to Zoom in with you for this conference. I look forward to hearing from you. Be well, be very safe, stay connected with the people that see what's going right and well in your life, and do not hesitate to reach out to me at any time. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week, and stay in touch.
Our next speaker is Kevin Wanzer. Since 1983, Kevin has spoken in front of well over 3,000 audiences all over the world, including 49 states, Canada, China, Europe, and Singapore. He has been noted nationally as one of the most effective and entertaining speakers for corporations, organizations, schools, colleges, and to audiences of adults who work with and empower the lives of youth. His program encourages audiences to discover their hidden passions, embrace diversity, and celebrate the laughter in all of us. Kevin is the author of Choose to Love. He has also been noted nationally as one of the most effective and entertaining speakers for inspiring and empowering audiences. He helps people enhance their soft skills, reconnect with their hidden passions, embrace diversity, and celebrate community through laughter. Please welcome Kevin Wanzer.
Aloha, I'm Kevin Wanzer. I hope you enjoyed that video as much as I did, and that peanut butter and jelly will never be the same again. I appreciate the symbolism of the pinwheel. Shining in the sun, the pinwheels represent a bright future for our children and our community. We want all children to live in a stable, loving, and stimulating environments at home, in school, and in the community. That's what today is all about. Today's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a little bit different than what you're expecting. Of course, I've never presented like this before, one-on-one, virtually. So we're all in this together. The overall journey today and what we're doing to embrace and empower the lives of so many young people and their families begins with connections. Before we begin, though, I thought I would share with you what I call Larry David moments. Larry David, if you're not familiar, is the co-creator of Seinfeld. He has a show on HBO called Curb Your Enthusiasm. He gets himself in very uncomfortable and awkward situations, which I find myself as well. This is a Panera Bread in Indianapolis, Indiana, that I can never go to again as long as I'm alive. And I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. Every Panera Bread has the obligatory comfy chairs, the chairs that are right in front of the fireplace, because they want to make you feel at home until you bring in your own menorah and Christmas tree, and they call the FBI. And so I go in there one day to get some work done because, having ADHD, I can't get work done at home, so I typically have to go elsewhere. And I sit down and in the comfy chairs, and the chairs are always right in front of the fireplace, as I mentioned. And this particular day, when I went up there, I had to drive a car that I was not accustomed to. That's very crucial to the story. There's two cars in my family. There's the Mazda and there's the Jetta. The Jetta belongs to my daughter. I want nothing to do with it. It's a landfill. It's disgusting. I never drive the Jetta. I drive the Mazda along with Matthew, my husband. You know what that means? His husband's gay. And so we drive the Mazda. And so this particular day I had to drive the Jetta because the Mazda was getting new tires, so I didn't have a choice. So I go up there, and that's key to the story. And I go up there and I sit down, and as I sit down in the comfy chairs, I noticed that in between the two chairs was a set of keys. Someone had left their keys. So I take them and I put them in the chair next to me, and I'm sitting there and I'm getting work done for like an hour, and now I realize whoever's keys these belong to, they've not come to claim them yet. They must still either be here, or maybe they left with someone else, or called Uber. I have no idea, but I have to go. And so I take the keys and I stand in line for the cashier. And as I'm standing in line, I start thinking, well, I hope that whoever's keys these belong to, they'll finally, find them. And I get up and she goes, oh, can I take your order? And I was like, well, no, I was here a few minutes ago getting some work done, and I found these keys. I wanted to turn them in. And the cashier looks at me and she goes, oh, that's great. I'm on break in 20 minutes. I'll give them to the manager then. And I said, well, no, I don't think you should wait 20 minutes to get into the manager. Maybe it's best if I talk to the manager. And she looks at me and she goes, I think I can handle the situation. And it got a little weird. I don't really handle altercation well. And I said, well, I just think it's best if I talk to the manager. And so she goes and gets the assistant manager. It was a delight. And I tell her, I said, look, I just found these keys. I wanted to turn them in. Oh, great. I'll put them in the safe. Okay, great. So now I go outside to go home. And I can feel right now some of you are way ahead of me on this. As I go out into the parking lot to go home, I start looking around and I start realizing, oh my gosh, somebody stole my car. And I'm looking around and I'm like, who steals a car? I can't believe my car is gone. I haven't heard of anyone stealing a car in years. I haven't stolen a car and it'll be 3 years next Tuesday. So here I am, I'm looking around and I start thinking, okay, Kevin, this is crazy. What am I going to do? I'm not going to call the police. I'm definitely not calling Matthew. I start looking around like, okay, think. Where did you park? I know I parked right next to this car that looks like your daughter's car, the Jetta. Oh, Kevin, you're an idiot. You didn't drive your car. You drove this car. You drove the Jetta. Oh, I can't believe it. Isn't that crazy? So now I realize I drove the Jetta and I start looking around and I cannot find my keys. I have no idea where they are. I'm looking around. I go back inside. I look around the comfy chairs. Can't find them. I come back outside. I take my little speaking suitcase with my computer and such and I put it on the hood of the car and I'm looking through it. Can't find them. Delivery guy comes out. Hey, is everything okay? Yeah, somehow I lost my keys. Oh, well, I was just in the back a few minutes ago. I overheard people talking. Someone turned in some keys. And I'm like, oh, those have to be mine. Like someone found my keys. And so like an idiot, I go back inside and I'm standing in line for the same lady I just talked to a few seconds ago. And I'm standing there and I'm starting to think to myself, isn't that weird? Like, what are the odds? What are the odds that I found keys and I turned in? Oh my gosh, Kevin, you turned in your own keys. And at this point, I really do not know what to do because I don't know how I'm going to handle myself. This lady doesn't like me to begin with. And so I'm standing in line and there's people in between me and her. And I start thinking, well, maybe she sees a lot of people. Maybe she won't remember me. Oh, and then I think, well, if she does remember me, I know what I'll do. I'll just pretend to be somebody else. That's how I decide to solve this situation. So I'm standing in line. I finally get up and she goes, oh, it's you again. And out of nowhere, I'm all in. I all of a sudden morph into a 95-year-old man. Excuse me, did anyone turn in any keys? And she looks at me and she goes, oh my gosh, what is happening to you right now? I'm like, I cannot find my keys. And I'm having an out-of-body experience. Kevin, what are you doing? Well, you're an old man. Oh my God, what's going on with your right arm? And then I answer myself, oh, that's your cane. What? You don't even have a cane. So now I look like some DJ Demented scratching Snoop Dogg, Post Malone grandpa. Are you being serious right now? Yes, I cannot find my keys. And she looks at me and she goes, well, as a matter of fact, somebody turned in some keys. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. Okay, dearie, can you go get those keys for me? No, I think it's best if you talk to the manager. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so now she goes and gets the manager. He has my keys and he looks like a nice guy. And she goes, sir, that person that you're going to go give those keys to over there, he's the same guy that turned in the keys. And he looks at me, I'm over there, my tongue's wagging around. And he looks at her and he goes, it's okay, my grandfather is in a home. Oh my gosh. And so now he walks up to me and he has the keys and he dangles them in front of me. Sir, are these your keys? Oh yes, those are my keys. Thank you. Where did you find them? He goes, some kind person turned them in. Oh, that's wonderful. If you ever see that person again, make sure you tell them thank you for me. And as I take the keys and I turn to leave, he stops and he goes, sir, thank you. And I can never go to this Panera again as long as I'm alive. There's no way I can show my face. I know we've all had situations that have happened to us in our life where at the time they happened to you, you try to convince yourself you're the only one that's ever had that situation. And chances are you are right. I know what you do in the world of helping young people and their families and preventing child abuse can feel like a one-person play sometimes, and that we do feel alone. And I hope that after today, you'll have a sense of feeling connected to each other and a renewed sense of spirit to remind you as to why you chose this work to begin with. I live in Indianapolis. I've been doing this for a long time. I started doing this when I was in high school, and ever since then I have gone around the United States and I've talked about what it is to deliver the gift of laughter. If you take the idea of laughter and comedy and what it does to the body, laughter increases your blood flow. It lowers your blood pressure. It strengthens your abs for some people. Hey, don't laugh at that. It reduces stress hormones. It builds T cells and immunity. It increases memory and learning. And it also gives you an overall sense of well-being. That's what today's all about. It's a gift from me to you to celebrate laughter and the difference we make in people's lives. A couple years ago, I was invited to speak in Northern Indiana at a back-to-school rally for some educators, for teachers, for the whole school district the day before school began. And as I'm sitting there getting ready to be introduced, the superintendent gets up on stage and she goes, I'm really glad that you're all back. You are the best teachers in the entire state of Indiana. You're the best teachers in the entire country of the United States of America, except for two of you. Two of you in here have lost your passion for what it is to be an educator. And I know that you know who you are. And I can't fire you because of the union. So I just wanted you to really think about why you are doing what you're doing and consider making this your last year in education. Everyone sat there totally awkward. And then she's like, okay, here to make you laugh. Here's Kevin. And I come out on stage and I feel like I have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. And I said, how many of you think that you may be one of those two people? And everyone's laughing at this point. And one guy in the back raises his hand. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I look at her, the superintendent sitting in the front row, and she's nodding her head, yes. And I'm like, oh this is so uncomfortable now. And I go up to the guy afterwards and I apologize. It's like, I hope I didn't make you feel uncomfortable. I was not doing anything to embarrass you. And he goes, you know what? Last year I had a really tough time in my life, in my personal life. And obviously that bled over into the classroom, and it made such a difference that it got all the way to the superintendent. And I needed today as my wake-up call. And turns out he had a great school year. He had a great year the next year. He just needed a reminder as to why he chose what he did to begin with, and the difference that he makes every single day, and how his attitude can spill over to not only just the young people, but of course his colleagues and those he interacts with. Today we're going to talk about compassion fatigue just a little bit, as a reminder that sometimes the problems of others, the people that we interact with and work with, we can take on those problems as problems of our own. And I'm going to give you some tools not only to identify what compassion fatigue is, but tools that you can use to help yourself. But it's all about building connections. It's about how we relate to each other. It's about how we find the joy in everyday situations, finding the funny. I spoke at a conference a few years ago in Indianapolis. It was the WICS conference, Women, Infant, Children Services. I told my mom I was going to speak there. Mom, I'm speaking at the WICS conference. Oh, I love Yankee candles. Okay, Mom. And so before my keynote, before my address, my voice was kind of parched, and I was looking for some water. And there was the ballroom at the Marriott East Hotel in Indianapolis, and right next to the ballroom was this little kind of room set off to the side. And I go in there, and I see like a cooler. I see a cooler, a Pepsi cooler, and I can tell that it's a refrigerator by the way it's laid out. I'm thinking, oh, maybe there's water in there. So as I step into the room to get some water, a lady comes over, puts her hand on my shoulder, and she goes, can I help you with something? And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to be your speaker in a few minutes. My voice is kind of going. I thought maybe I would just get some water. And she goes, oh, no, there's nothing in there for you. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, can you at least look? And she goes, I can look, but I can guarantee you there's nothing there. And so she looks in the fridge, and then she looks at me and she goes, nope, all we have is milk. And I'm like, milk? Like, who drinks milk before they speak? And as I turn, I noticed this sign right outside the room that I'd missed before I had gone in. So I saw that and I ran. If we all could not laugh, we would all go insane. Robert Frost said that many, many years ago. And I think it's so true. If we cannot laugh at ourselves, if we can't laugh at the stuff around us, if we lose the ability to find the funny in everyday situations in life, it really does deter not only the difference we make in what we do, but also the way we feel about what we do. Building connections, how we relate to each other. Because we see the worst of the worst, but you do the best of the best work that truly matters to young people in this county and throughout the state. It's about how we connect with young people and their families. That's how we make a difference that is sustainable and long-term and truly matters. I've been finding the funny my entire life. I make a hobby of it. I keep a comedy journal where I write down certain things that happen to me that kind of make me laugh. A few summers ago, I was getting gas at a Shell gas station in Indianapolis. This is an actual photo from that day. I put the nozzle back in the gas pump. As I do, I notice above the gas pump is a sign. And I look at this guy, I'm like, oh my gosh, that guy looks a lot like me. I have never been so freaked out in my entire life. I could not believe the customer service. Here he comes, put up the sign. Here's another good example of finding the funny in life. Actually, here's a gift that you guys can all take home to your families. Now, some of you in here are going to be a little bit upset by this, so I apologize in advance, but all of you in here are going to sometime in your life eventually use this idea as your own. All right, here we go. I'm going to put on this little neck garment. I'm going to adjust it so that the top and the bottom are relatively the same length. And then I'm going to roll the big part and I'm going to roll the little part. And I'm going to drop them at the exact same time. And all you have to do is challenge people to guess which one is going to win the race, the big part or the little part. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. It's a tie. Thank you. No. Please do not laugh at that. Okay, yeah, I noticed you're not. So again, finding the funny, building connections, finding out what we have in common so that we can build that foundation and reach out to those that typically are left behind or forgotten. Marcus Valerius Martial in 400 AD said, "Life is not merely to be alive, but to be well." In order for us to make a difference in the lives of countless young people and their families, we have to be able to take care of ourselves. There's a gentleman, his name is Dr. Charles Figley. He is the one that coined the phrase compassion fatigue. He said this: "Compassion fatigue is a state experienced by people or animals in distress. It is an extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering of those being helped to the degree that it can create a secondary traumatic stress for the caregiver." In short, basically, it's taking on the problems of others. When we give care and when we give compassion and reach out to those that really truly need it, sometimes their stories take a toll on our hearts. So it's important for us not to just identify what compassion fatigue is. It's important to understand the symptoms, of course, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But it's also important to realize that if you are experiencing compassion fatigue, and chances are you have, or you will sometime down the road, what can you do for yourself to make a difference in your own life so that therefore you'll affect other people's lives in a positive way? There's an assessment that you can take that's a self-assessment that tells you whether or not you are dealing with compassion fatigue right now. We're not going to take the assessment right now, obviously, but if you would like a copy of it, all you have to do is just send me an email to aloha, ALOHA, at kevinwanzer.com, and I will gladly email you the assessment. It's a self-scoring assessment, so you can see for yourself how compassion fatigue plays a role in your life. The first symptom is chronic physical and emotional exhaustion. Sometimes we just don't know how we're going to get through the day. Our body aches, our mind aches. We feel on the verge of tears at any moment. Depersonalization, kind of like feeling everything's a dream, that you're a little bit disconnected from the things and the people that we're around and the situations we're in. Feelings of inequity toward the therapeutic or caregiver relationship. Sometimes we wonder if what we do truly makes a difference, that we start building a wall up around us. Irritability, always being on edge, always being irritable, jumping, being grumpy. Feelings of self-contempt, feeling like what you're doing is not making a difference and that it will never make a difference, and you just don't know why you chose to do this to begin with. Difficulty sleeping, insomnia, staying up for things that you don't understand what is keeping you awake. Weight change, either gaining too much weight or losing weight over a rapid amount of time, and headaches, tension, stress. These can all be symptoms of what it is to experience compassion fatigue. So once you've identified whether or not you feel that you have compassion fatigue in your life, here are some simple things that actually make a difference. How to combat compassion fatigue. 1, authentic, sustainable self-care. These are things that really do make a difference. Asking for help. So many times we are the caregivers that we are always giving the help that we don't know how to ask for help ourselves. Putting yourself first. Spending time alone. Asking for what you need. Setting boundaries. Staying at home. Saying no more than you say yes. Forgiving yourself. Taking a step back. Authentic, sustainable care is something that you can do for yourself that makes a difference in other people's lives because you're more present. You're more authentic to who you are. Empathy. Not always just caring for others, but having empathy for yourself. Understanding that we're not perfect and that it's okay for us to fall. It's getting back up, of course, that makes the difference. A balanced life. Finding out what brings you joy and incorporating those things in your life on a daily basis. Embrace spirituality. They've done studies that find out that people that embrace their own spiritual nature truly are happier people, and they're able to deal with the more difficult things in life. Be mindful. Mindfulness is so important, whether it's meditation or prayer or just moments of calm in your life throughout the day. And to be grateful, to be thankful for all the wonderful things we do have in our life. So many times we focus on the negative, or we see all the negative that's happening around us. We forget all the things to be thankful for. And finally, to really work on feeling and being resilient. This happens by being able to embrace change. No one really likes change, but it's going to happen. So embracing the change. Don't dwell on the negative. To really understand yourself and what you're able to deal with and what you're able to not deal with, and get the help that you need when you need it. To create goals, realistic goals. To take action on the goals. To be optimistic. To have a sense of humor. And develop strong personal connections. The way we relate with each other is the way we relate to ourselves. It's so important for us to build these connections and to allow young people to realize that it's okay for them to fall. It's okay for them to feel alone. It's okay for them to come to us for help. They believe in Hawaii that when you're born, you have a bowl of light inside of you. That light's called mana, and that mana means power. And that light is our connection to the universe, to whatever spiritual being you choose to believe, to each other. We all share the same light. And every time something negative happens to a young person, perhaps they're abused, perhaps they're put down or neglected, or told they're no good or disrespected, little tiny pebbles start filling up that bowl of light. If you put one pebble in a bowl of light, the light still shines. It's no big deal. But day after day, hour after hour, some young people experience these negative emotions and negative situations all the time, where eventually so many pebbles start filling up that bowl of light, the light seems to become suffocated. The light's still there, it can't break through all the negativity. Some people spend their entire adult lives believing that the light isn't there at all. And so they put other people down, they disrespect others. When in reality, every time something negative happens to you, they believe that in Hawaii, that when something negative happens, you take that pebble and you don't ask yourself, oh my gosh, why did this happen to me? You ask, how can I use this as an advantage? How can I use this as an opportunity to actually grow stronger and to remove that pebble and allow that light to shine? That's what you do every single day. You empower young people and the families you serve to remove pebbles from their bowl of light and become stronger. But you can only do that in an effective way if you're able to combat the compassion fatigue that some of us experience. There's only two emotions in the world. There's fear and there's love. Where there is no love, there's fear. And where there is no fear, there's love. And we all share a limitless light. We all share the exact same connection, the exact same calling as to why we're here today. So thank you for that. Because even though we seem different and we come from different worlds and different backgrounds, our differences are what bring us together. Our differences are what make us alike. Building connections. A in the word aloha represents the idea of what it is to choose to act. If you want to make a difference in a young person's life or the family of a young person that you serve, one of the most important things you can do is to build the connection. One of my best friends in the world, his name is Matt White. He had ALS. He lived 19 years with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And he passed away just a little over a year ago. But there were so many lessons that I took from him in my life. The most important lesson I took is the perseverance, his choice to have a positive attitude. I mean, if you don't know anything about ALS, eventually the entire body becomes paralyzed, where nothing happens with the brain. The body pretty much shuts down, but the brain is always functioning. And so towards the end of his life, all he could do was move his eyes. And he had a way to be able to communicate. There was a chart with letters on it. And by the way he would blink his eyes, he was able to communicate certain words that he was spelling out. And this was just an amazing tool. We really took for granted the simple things, what he would have given just to be able to move his little finger, much less his entire body. But he was able to use his eyes as a tool to reach out and communicate. And so I asked him, I said, what's the one piece of advice that you could give? If there's one thing that you had to say to people, audiences around the country, what would you say? He said, never ever let the person you're with feel that you have something more important to do. And that really is why you're successful. Because when you're around the young people that you serve, the families that you work with, you make them feel that they're the only thing that matters. You allow them to feel that there's nothing more important right now than you being with them. Also, without a doubt, Matt could be looked at as one of the most positive people to ever live, because all he could say was yes, right? Every time he moved his eye, blinked his eye, that meant yes. I spoke at a conference one time at a resort in Amelia Island, Florida. I don't want to tell you what resort it was, but I love their crackers and their buttery goodness. And so I'd never been to to a Ritz-Carlton before, and I was in the lobby of the hotel, and I had to use the restroom. And there was a gentleman there that was working, and I said, "Excuse me, can you tell me where the restroom is?" He goes, No, but it'd be my pleasure to take you there. That's what everybody said that works there. It was always my pleasure. And so I thought, oh, okay. And so we start walking towards the restroom, and I noticed he had a name tag, and underneath his name tag, it said table tennis. I'm like, why does that say table tennis? He goes, well, when you get a job here, they ask you to come up with a list of all the things that you love. And then they give you name tags with your name printed on it, with those things listed underneath your name. He goes, I didn't understand the assignment. Most people have 6 or 7 name tags. He goes, I have over 30 name tags because I wrote down everything I could possibly think of that I loved. I have a name tag that says BLT sandwiches because I love BLTs. And so every day I choose a different name tag and I put it on. And then when I meet people like you throughout the day, people notice my name and then they ask, why is that on your name tag? I was like, well, why is it? Why is table tennis on your name tag? He goes, well, when I was in junior college, I was one of the table tennis champions of the southeastern United States of America. I was like, oh my gosh. And he tells me this amazing story about playing ping pong and going to China. I go, that is incredible. And he goes, and that's why it's on the name tag. So I have a way to connect with people. And then when I get done telling them about myself, I ask them, what is on your name tag? I was like, oh, that's great. That's really, really. And he goes, no, I'm asking you right now. What's on your name tag? And I had to think for a second. What's it? If I had to put one thing that I love on my name tag, what would that one thing be? And I thought about my family. And I started sharing about my family. We made such a connection from the short time from the lobby to the bathroom. We finally got to the bathroom. And I told him, I'll take it from here because I'm not sure how far this whole customer service thing goes, Mr. Carlton. But it really, really helped me realize that focusing on the little things that we're passionate about. If you want to connect with the young people and the families that you serve, find out what people choose to love. Once you focus on what they love and you act in a positive way to engage with them and for them to identify what they love, really does make a difference. And it's a way for us to overcome our compassion fatigue as well, because we're focusing outward. We're focusing on things that other people love and allow them to feel connected and heard in ways that other people have never made them feel before. Like when you stay at a hotel, you obviously leave gratuity for the housekeeper. Well, at this particular week at the Ritz-Carlton, I would write notes for the housekeeper. Thank you for what you do. It really does matter. And I would leave the gratuity. This is the first housekeeper ever that actually wrote back. Oh, thank you so much for the note. That was very kind. Where are you visiting from and what are you looking forward to doing today? It's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I have homework. And so throughout the week, we kind of corresponded back and forth. And on one of the last days that we were there, I finally met her. I was like, hey, it's so nice to meet you. Everyone you've met here seems so authentically wonderful, so authentically kind. So what's going on? Are they hiring the right people or are they training you in the right way? She goes, that's a great question. She goes, first of all the people that work here are pretty positive because they do a really good job of screening out the negativity. But also, we're really well respected from our administration. We're really well respected from our bosses. We're taken care of financially. We really are held in high esteem. And I think that stuff really does matter. Then she stops and says, oh, and when we go through training, they always tell us that no matter whatever the situation is with a guest, the answer always starts with yes. You always start with the positive. I was like, yeah, but that's unrealistic. That's very Pollyannish. Like if I say to you, I want to have dinner tonight on the roof of the hotel overlooking the ocean with a baby shark swimming around right in front of me, eating a homemade peanut butter cup with a birthday candle burning itself down. I go, we can't do that now, can we, Jessica? And she looks at me and she goes, yes, Kevin, technically we could. However, if we go to the roof of the hotel, that's where the air conditioning units are, and it's really loud up there, and it's very, very hot. So let me make a suggestion. We have a DJ that has a stand in between the ocean, the beach, and the pool. He's not working tonight. The stand's about 10 feet tall. I can arrange it so that you can have dinner on that stand overlooking the ocean. And I don't live that far from here. I have a 6-year-old son. He has a baby remote control shark. I'm going to go get that shark and get his baby swimming pool and set it up on that stand so that you can sit up there overlooking the ocean with the baby shark swimming around right in front of you, eating a peanut butter cup with the birthday candle burning itself down. And I looked at her. I was like, I said homemade peanut butter cup, right? And we start laughing. And she goes, I'm going to make this happen. I was like, no, please do not make it happen. But I love the idea that you're able to find something ridiculous and still find a way to say yes. Well, that story does not stop here. The next day, I go down to breakfast to speak at this conference. And as I'm going to the buffet line, I notice at the end of the buffet is a little coffee saucer. And on the coffee saucer is a Post-it note with my name and my room number. And on the coffee saucer was this: a homemade peanut butter cup with a birthday candle burning itself down. And as I start looking around, I realize she's not there. And it wasn't about her. She knew that that simple act would be something that I would hold on to as a memory forever. And she's absolutely right. Sometimes we have no idea that the kindness that we have towards others affects them in ways that will last the rest of their life. It's all about choosing to act. It's all about making a difference when other people do not. L in the word aloha represents choosing to love. If you want to make a connection with a young person, if you want to build a relationship with a family that you serve, one of the greatest gifts you can give is to identify what they choose to love and focus on that passion and build the relationship from there. I adopted my child when they were really little. Yeah, that's not them, but that's a cute kid. Actually, this is Scout. This is who we adopted. At 5 years old, she came to live with us. And I had never been a dad before. I had no idea what to do or how to go about this. And there was a lot of rage. There was a lot of anger in her life. And I found out really early on that she loved vacuum cleaners. Now, let me make this clear. She didn't like vacuum cleaners. She loved vacuum cleaners. Anytime we were having a tough day, we would just vacuum. We'd go to a vacuum cleaner repair store. She wanted to vacuum in every state in the country. That was her goal. When she was little, for spring break, we found out there's a place in Missouri called the Vacuum Cleaner Museum and Hall of Fame. Are you kidding me? Their slogan is, "Our museum really sucks." They were right. Here's the point. As soon as I realized what she chose to love and I focused my energy into that, it built our relationship in a way that was unlike anything else. A year later, November 2nd, that's Forever Day. That's when we adopted Scout. And I took her down to Disney as a celebration. And I gave her the autograph book. And we're standing in line for Buzz Lightyear. Now, I had assumed that she knew who Buzz Lightyear was, but it turns out she'd never seen Toy Story. I had no idea. So as we're in line, she's jumping up and down. And I said, "Scout, you seem really happy right now." "Dad, I've never been on a ride before. This is my first ride." I'm like, "Honey, no, we're not in line right now for a ride. We're in line for that guy's autograph." And she goes, "What does that mean?" I go, "He's going to write his name in your book." And she goes, "Dad, are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, we have to wait in this long line in this hot sun just so that guy can write his name in my book?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Dad, do you know how to write his name?" I'm like, "Yeah. Can you just write his name in my book and we can get out of here?" I'm like, "Absolutely." So I read Buzz and we get out of there. That day for lunch, "Scout, where do you want to go for lunch?" She wants to go to Cinderella's castle. She loves the idea that Cinderella had a really tough childhood and things turned out to be okay. Kind of a metaphor to her life. So as we sit down, the lady walks up, the waitress, and the first thing she says is not, "Can I take your drink order? Or would you like an appetizer?" Nope. She's like you. She totally focuses on Scout. She uses Scout's name in conversation. She makes eye contact. And then she goes, "Scout, I want you to think really hard and then tell me, what is the number one thing that you love more than anything else in the whole wide world?" And I'm like, "No way." And Scout looks at me, "Dad, should I tell her?" I was like, "Yeah." And Scout stands up. She goes, "I love vacuum cleaners." And the lady just laughed and she goes, "Scout, I need a new vacuum." Scout goes, "You need a Dyson." And they start talking about vacuums. They're going back and forth. Scout says, "I want to vacuum in every state in the country." "Scout, honey, have you vacuumed in Florida yet?" "No, I have not. Will you come with me?" And she takes Scout by the hand and they go off through some door. And about 10 minutes go by, the door opens up, Scout walks out into the dining room, she has the tiara on, and in her right hand she has a vacuum. And she yells at me across the restaurant, "Dad, I'm vacuuming in Cinderella's castle! I'm the wicked stepsister!" I'd seen Scout happy before, but I never saw her that happy because of a total stranger that just took the time to ask the question, "What do you love?" At the end of the meal, we get up to go, and Scout tracks down the waitress to say goodbye. And I'm looking at him, and they give each other a hug, and Scout comes back. I said, "Scout, I think it's really great that you went to say goodbye." "Dad, I went to say thank you." "Oh, even better, honey. Most people never say thank you to someone that they just met." And she goes, "Dad, I want to show you something." And we sit back down at the table, and Scout starts flipping through the autograph book. And she stops at a page, and she looks at it, and she looks at me, and she goes, "Dad, look." And she pushes it to me. And I'm looking at it, and it's a blank page. I'm like, "What am I looking at?" And she goes, "Turn the page." And I turned the page, and I saw it, and I looked at Scout's face, and Scout lights up. Scout's like, "I got her autograph." And the lady did not just sign her name. The lady signed, "Scout, take the time to discover who you truly are and what you truly love, and follow those two things for as long as you're alive. My Scout, that is beautiful. Congratulations. I go, let's go to the park now. Let's get the character autographs. And she goes, Dad, I'm going to tell you something. I hope you don't cry. I'm like, oh man. She goes, Dad, the characters are fake. But this lady was real, and she really made me feel good. And she's the only autograph that I want. Here's the deal. Some of us in here are not going to remember all the young people we worked with throughout our life. We're not going to remember all the families we've impacted and interacted with on a daily basis for such a long time. But they remember you. They remember your kindness. They remember your love. They remember your empathy. They remember that you took the time to connect with them in times that other people never did. Thank you for that. It's all about choosing to love. In 1992, I wrote a poem that came to me in a dream. I never did anything with the poem at all until I adopted Scout. And then I turned it into a book, a message that people could share with others. The message is so perfect to represent what it is that you choose to do. It goes like this. It is amazing in this world today that's filled with love and hate what separates the common one from the one who's truly great. For it's not the money in your bank account or the stuff in your backyard. It's instead what you share from inside of your loving, compassionate heart. You do not choose your color of skin. You don't choose to be born rich or poor. You don't choose to be deaf or blind, wishing you had something more. You don't choose with whom you fall in love. You don't choose to be born woman or man. You don't choose your family at birth. It's all part of a much larger plan. And although for some it's hard to relate to the differences that others endure, keep in mind there are certain choices that make you shallow or pure. You do choose to love or hate. You do choose to follow or lead. You do choose to embrace or ignore others in their time of need. Some things in life you cannot change, but your attitude can change. It's true. And by doing so, you can affect the people who look up to you. The meaning of life is the greatest mystery of all, but the answer is easily found. It's unconditional love for all humankind who walk on our common ground. Thank you for choosing to love. Thank you for choosing to love not only the kids that you work with, but choosing to love what you do. It all comes down to these three things. Choosing to love what you do, choosing to love the colleagues that you work with every single day, and choosing to love the people that we serve. Thank you for that. O represents the idea of ohana, the idea of making sure that no one is ever left behind or forgotten, the Hawaiian word for family. It's about treating each other as family because we are family. You know, Scout loves vacuums. I love dogs. My favorite dog is any dog that's in front of me right now. There's no such thing as a bad dog. I had a dog named Dreyfus. I love Dreyfus so much. Dreyfus is a little different than other dogs in the sense that, well, I'll explain it in a second. And so this is Dreyfus. I love Dreyfus's eyes in this photo. It looks like the photo that was taken right before he's abducted by the UFO, all right? This was my other dog, Corky. I adopted Corky from the Humane Society because I wanted Dreyfus to have a friend. And so when I got him, his tail was always tucked between his legs because the dog does not know how to pretend. You cannot take a dog that's sad and teach it to pretend to be happy. A dog acts the way that it feels. We can pretend. As a matter of fact, some of us in here interact and talk to young people all the time where in reality their tail's tucked between their legs, but they pretend everything is just fine. And so Dreyfus and Corky, they became friends. And whenever Dreyfus was around Corky, his tail started to wag. You could just say his name. Dreyfus, where's Corky? His tail would wag. Or for those of you in here that have dogs, you ever seen your dog sleep when they're dreaming and their paws start going through the air like they're going through some enchanted rawhide forest? And so when Corky used to sleep, I used to whisper into his ears, Dreyfus loves you. And every time I'd say Dreyfus loves you, his tail started to twitch in his dreams. I thought that's a miracle. Dreyfus loved Corky so much, Corky was able to remove the pebbles from his bowl of light and get back to being the dog that he authentically was. That's you. That's exactly what you do. You allow young people to remove their pebbles from the bowl of light and rediscover who they are in an authentic way. There's no greater gift than that. And so Dreyfus and Corky, they became friends. And one thing that I think Corky never noticed about Dreyfus was that Dreyfus was different than most dogs. As you can tell, Dreyfus only has 3 legs. Now, he didn't know. I mean, he knew, but he thought he was normal, and 4-legged dogs were not. He used to go up to Corky and nibble on Corky's back left leg. And I honestly believe he was trying to remove his leg. I honestly believe he felt bad that Corky had to carry around an extra appendage that obviously he didn't need because Dreyfus didn't need it, so what's the big deal? And the other great thing about his leg being gone is how kids react. Some kids don't know the leg's gone. Some kids know it's gone, They just don't know it's different till you teach them it's different. My niece Anna, when she was little, Anna, how is Dreyfus different than other dogs? She's like, well, he really loves cat food. I'm like, all right, what about his leg being gone? Isn't that different? And she's like, no, because Dreyfus is a 3-legged dog. And 3-legged dogs are only supposed to have 3 legs. And she's right. 3-legged dogs have 3 legs. And so the great thing about Dreyfus is that kids never noticed. They never noticed that it was gone until you taught them that it was different. I took Dreyfus on a walk one time, and a kid came up, and a kid goes, can I pet your dog? And I'm like, yeah, but you got to be careful. If you touch him, you're his new best friend. Because other dogs can pick up their back right legs and scratch their ears, but he can't because he'd collapse. So all you have to do is put your hand out, and he'll just manipulate his body to whatever area needs to be scratched. And sometimes it's cute, and sometimes it's not so cute. And so the kid is petting Dreyfus, and I'm talking to the mom. And the mom's a total stranger. And as we're talking, the mom looks at me and she goes, oh, did you know your dog only has 3 legs? I'm like, well, I got him for 25% off. So the mom goes, honey, you better not touch that dog anymore. He only has 3 legs. And the kid didn't know, because the kid, he started putting his arm underneath Dreyfus's body to make sure it wasn't invisible. And when he realized it was gone, he started getting tears in his eyes. I'm like, well, that's cute. He feels sorry for Dreyfus. And then I realized, no, he didn't feel sorry for him. He was scared. He didn't want to look at him, play with him. 2 minutes ago, he's his best friend, and now he's scared. And I realized that mom just put a pebble in that kid's bowl of light. The kid is now prejudiced against 3-legged dogs. And even though it doesn't make any sense, why would anyone be scared of a 3-legged dog? I don't know. Why is anyone scared of anyone that's different? We empower the lives of young people to feel different. We empower the lives of young people that have gone through things that other people, it's unimaginable. Thank you for allowing them to feel connected. Thank you for allowing them to feel that they're not being left behind or forgotten, all because of the work that you do. Oh, by the way, Dreyfus used to be a hero of mine because he was different and only had 3 legs. Until one time I spoke in North Carolina, I met this dog. This is Faith. Faith was born with 2 legs. This lady actually taught Faith to stand up and walk around like a person. I've never seen anything like it before in my entire life. So she's going to start running in a second. I love that. And so she became my hero until I met this horse. No, I'm just kidding. That's not a real. Good luck explaining that one to your family. So again, thank you so much for making sure, allowing people to feel connected, especially those that are left behind. And the letters H-A in Aloha represent having a sense of humor. In Hawaii, the letters H-A means breath, the breath of life. I believe that comedy and laughter and humor is the breath of life. It's the one thing that brings us all together as one. I spoke at a conference one time in Anaheim, California. This is my favorite story of all times. They had an elevator system there where it's a little bit different than most elevators. Most elevators, of course, have the buttons for the floors inside the elevator, but not this place. This place, the Marriott Hotel in Anaheim, California, they had an entirely different set of elevator rules. Outside the elevator was a little kiosk where you walk up and you type in your floor number, and it assigns you a specific elevator, and you get in that elevator and it takes you straight to your floor. So every elevator is, in essence, an express elevator. It may go to 2 floors, but it will never go more than 2 floors. And they had to explain that to me, obviously. I didn't just automatically know how the elevator system of this hotel works. And so the guy in front of me, he types in floor number 8. It says go to elevator K. I type in 18. It says go to elevator K. So I know that my elevator is going to stop at 8 and then 18. Fine. I get in the elevator, and with the guy going to 8, the doors start to close. As they start to close, he starts freaking out. Oh my gosh, I forgot my credit card. He runs off the elevator. As soon as he left the elevator, I of course am left by myself. The doors start to close, and I know that my elevator is still going to go to 8 and then 18, because the elevator's not that sophisticated that it knows that the 8 guy's gone. As the doors start to close, another guy is showing up at the elevator bank, and he's looking at me, and he's running full force towards my elevator. Excuse me, can you please hold the elevator? Now, I'm a pretty nice guy. Of course, I'd hold the elevator for anyone, but not in this particular case, because in this case, he doesn't know what's going on. He's going to get in the elevator, the doors are going to shut, he's going to have to go all the way up to the top, all the way down to the bottom. I don't have time to explain this to him, and so all I can say is the first thing that comes to my mind. He goes, can you please hold the elevator? And I just yell out, you don't know the rules! Now, can you imagine asking someone to hold the elevator and they scream at you like a lunatic that you don't know the rules? Because he looks at me and he's like, what did you say? And he starts running full force towards the elevator. I, of course, don't know what to do. Again, I don't handle altercation very well. I start squeezing the door shut. It's a glass elevator. He can see me inside, squeezing the door shut. He runs up, he looks at me, he puts his hand in between the doors to trigger the magic lasers. The door magically opens back up, and the guy gets in the elevator, and he is out of his mind mad. What is wrong with you? Why didn't you hold the elevator? And before I can say anything, he turns to push his floor, and he looks at me and he goes, what did you do with the buttons? And I immediately, instinctively, out of nowhere go, oh, no. This is a different type of elevator. This is called an intellivator. All you have to do is think of the floor number that you want to go to, and this elevator will do a scan of your brain, and it will take you to that floor. He goes, shut up, I'm not dumb. I'm like, no. I go, let's say we want to go to floor number 8. Because I know we're going to 8. Because the guy that was there before, he was going to 8. So he stands in the middle of the and I tell him, I go, here are some certain rules. You have to stand in the middle of the elevator. You have to close your eyes. You have to chant on that number. And as you act out the motion of the floor, the elevator will take you to that floor. I start going, 8. And the door opens at 8. I look at him, he goes, I have never seen anything like this before in my entire life. I'm like, I know, it's a miracle. I go, now let's say we want to go to floor 18. And he looks at me, he goes, yeah, but that's a 2-digit number. And I'm like, yeah, you already know how to do the 8. He goes, I'll be the 1. I'm like, oh my gosh. And he stands next to me, and both of us start going, 18! The door opens at 18. I get off the elevator. I am laughing so hard. I turn back around to explain to him what's going on. As I turn around, he's in the middle of the elevator with his eyes closed going, lobby! And now today, he's a manager at Panera. So again, I really hope that you had a good time listening to this message about compassion fatigue and about the tools necessary to really build connections and help combat compassion fatigue. A, choosing to act. L, choose to love. Choose to love the colleagues that you work with, choose to love what you do, and choose to love the people that you serve. O, choosing Ohana, making sure that no one is ever left behind or forgotten. And of course, choosing laughter. H-A. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure to virtually meet with you, and I hope to see you down the road. Aloha.
Thank you for joining us for this year's annual Prevent Child Abuse Conference. We miss seeing you all in a large room, and hopefully next year we will be back together. We've all had different stresses and concerns during the last several weeks. One of mine has been the children that are at home that nobody knows about. I ask you to join me in prayer for these children if you are a praying person, as I pray for them daily. Please make sure that you're taking care of yourselves as you continue to work in the field or work from home. We are only as good to the children in our community as we are to ourselves. We'll see you at next year's annual conference.